1, 2, Juliet, take 5, pick up.
I didn't just bring you here to see the photographs. There's something else.
This is my grandpa's old map. It's the map of days.
It shows you where loops are.
Map of days is a map of varying dates, locations, and places where loops are made. Miss Peregrine uses her little stopwatch and some voodoo magic to literally stop time and turn a switch and reverse it 24 hours. And she just does that every day.
And she creates this loop to protect the children from horrible monsters.
Well, a loop preserves the last 24 hours. Reset the loop, and the day is yours to live in again.
I think the pop culture reference of Groundhog Day is probably the way to most clearly describe it to anyone, in which the same things happen again and again, and but those that live in it can react differently, interact differently.
And bomb, bring it up, and click.
What I liked about it is it reminded me of a device that I'd seen in things like old Twilight Zones or Outer Limits.
When you stay to see the reset, Jake, it's really quite spectacular.
We've got real time-lapse photography being done on location. We've got a huge lighting array to kind of simulate day and night time-lapse sun movement and kind of moving shadows across people's faces and across the ground. We've got also, just to complicate things further, it's raining in the scene, but it's raining at the start of the scene and not at the end. So as she turns time backwards, the rain falls backwards and it stops raining. So we've got some kind of reverse photography to do. We want to tell the story that time's running backwards and it's coming back to the previous day.
When I was writing the book, I was looking for a visual reference to describe the house. Something beautiful, something amazing, something torn down, something, ruined. When we first walked onto this set and saw this house, it was just like an out-of-body experience, because here was this place that I had described, imagined, suddenly conjured into reality. It looks like my story. This place looks like a magical building where amazing people live, and something dark has happened, and, great things are still going to happen.
Sometimes it's instinct, and I think Tim, when he saw in the house, even though we've changed a few things, he felt the personality of Torenhof being right for the children. And sometimes, it's like for me when I'm looking for locations prior to a director seeing them, sometimes it's a gut feeling. You walk in and you just get the personality of a place.
Mark Ben. Take one of me. Hey, good.
When I saw it, walking through the trees and saw it, I just thought, wow, it wasn't like an institution or a hospital, it was like a home. And it just felt to me like, this seems like a home for peculiar children, so that was it. It's like when you cast an actor or whatever, it's just like, well, it seems right. And it was also a real house, which I think helped, especially with the kids. I think it helps with anybody. You're in a real place, you get to feel it as opposed to see it at the premiere after doing green screen.
How did you know about the pub?
You weigh approximately 109 pounds, correct?
Miss Peregrine's home was actually shot in Belgium, in Antwerp, and it was such an unbelievable Gothic house. And I was like, okay, Miss Peregrine could live in this house. To be in this house, in this garden, just made things kind of easy for me. You don't have green screen, it's real, it helps for the mood, and you're like, okay, I'm in the movie I thought I was doing,
I can't believe you're real. You're all real. I've never been anywhere like this. When I first sort of drove up around the corner on the horse and cart, it's the first thing we've done, and I hadn't actually seen the house, so my reaction is real. I'm looking up, I'm like, whoa. It's tall and it's sort of twisted, it's got huge spikes and spires. It really looks something out of a fairy tale, which I think Tim really wanted to capture, both in the house as well as the garden around it, and the trees which are shaped as monsters and animals, almost like Edward Scissorhands. It's really cool.
In fact, it's almost more about bringing some of the dark from the back
and into this.
On the forward.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
it is. Oh, that's actually much better than that.
No, it's very good, that.
When the house was first found and it was becoming more apparent that we could use it, then we had to decide what we were going to do with it. And what you see now is very different to the house that we saw when we saw it for the first time. It had basically been empty for about 5 or 6 years. There'd been a caretaker living it, so it wasn't derelict, but it meant that the interiors had quite a strong patina about them. And the initial idea was that Tim wanted to almost shoot everything here, exteriors and interiors. He loved the idea that you could move through the house, in and out of the house. But there are certain practicalities in the script and what happens on the interior in action sequences, which meant we really had to consider building some of those interiors at home.
Crap, it's almost reset.
We've got bigger problems than getting you home, Jake.
That's what I'm talking about.
50% now of the interiors that we see in the film are shot on the stages in London, but they're matching to the interiors here, so there's a sort of crossover in both of those sort of locations. Well, the condition of the house itself, the walls, the floors, the fabrics, they were almost in the correct period for us when we first saw it, but of course we wanted to bring our own style and colour to that with Tim. So in fact, the architecture is more or less the same, but we've changed all the colour palettes, all the fabrics, all the wall finishes, all the furnishings to fit into our, probably, we're 1943 officially when the house is full of its children, but we're presuming it's been dressed from prior to that, so our furnishings and decorations are from the 20s, sort of further forward.
A bomb dropped on you in 1943.
It is 1943.
September the 3rd, 1943.
All day, every day. It's our loop.
The choice in the book of having that sort of World War II setting, it's, especially in Britain, obviously a fascinating period, and aesthetically it's unique, and because it's got the sort of leftover remnants of sort of 30s design, but with that kind of 40s shabbiness, and so the time loop exists in that period, and that was something we very much wanted to keep from the book.
There's something about finding a location like this which is 90% there, and there are just things in it, idiosyncratic things that you look at that you would never really have thought about doing as a designer, but they just happen to be real.
You want to muck around? Your bees. Get it.
Most of the greens you see here, apart from the trees, is us. It was a very sort of bare landscape. It hadn't really been looked after a while, so anything up to about 6 feet, 8 feet, even higher, some of the smaller trees to block out some things we didn't want to see, is all us.
There was a pond, a great garden. They added some animal topiaries, like a centaur, dinosaur, elephant. It was very Tim Burton, actually.
Well, I just like all the different elements. It all came together in a house, and it just felt to me like that was part of the spirit of the book. When I saw the kids are bonding with each other, that was very special to me. And films do create that, but this one, because it's about kind of family, it made it even stronger to me in terms of like that connection of why you like making films.
So, there's a loop here in Blackpool. It's only 6 months old, January 11th, 2016.
In our story, we discover that a time loop can exist, and not only in Wales, but they're able to travel through a loop from the 1940s into present day 2016. That takes us to Blackpool.
This can't be it, can it?
Loop entrances can be anywhere.
Blackpool, UK, is probably a place not known to many people outside of England.
Well, Blackpool's an unusual place. It's a little bit out of time and a little magical, a little lost, really. It's a little bit like an extreme version of a seaside holiday town in a way, really.
It's a place that people would go to the beach during Victorian times, and over the years it's kind of fallen into a trace of what it used to be. It has a certain haunted quality.
Look, there's the tower. It's not far.
Blackpool serves as kind of the setting for our third act, the climax of the film. And Tim's a big fan of that place for quite a while. He spent some time there, and I think it's something he kind of knew he wanted to incorporate into the Miss Peregrine story.
Well, I've done a lot of shooting. I've made a lot of films in England, and that place, it just had weird, sort of strange elements. It just felt right for this film.
Working with Tim was exciting, and having his sensibilities in there. We have quite similar tastes in a lot of things, and we're both very fond of Blackpool. It has a really unusual energy about it, and something that I could see really translating beautifully to screen.
Blackpool, being a very specific environment, helped enormously, and being in the tower and in the circus, and actually physically seeing the fantastical nature of that space.
You, Jake, content to age and die as if you had not the gift of peculiarity at all?
Those things help you find your way in a story. When you walk into a space and the space is correct, like walking into that circus set, it's just, okay, I get it.
You know, we wanted a real place. Instead of building the whole thing, we just felt like it was important to be in that sort of environment. And I find in a movie like this, which is much more sort of grounded, we tried to use as much real things as possible.
I think a lot of films aren't made this way, you know. For a lot of movies, you would just make the facade that you need to shoot and then you tear it down. But these are buildings you can walk through as a spectator, not even watching the movie, and kind of get lost in the story, and the building itself is telling you a story.
A great location, I mean, a quite extraordinary location. There's probably nothing like it in the world, that circus built in the base of the Blackpool Tower.
It's, I believe, one of the oldest circuses in Britain, and it certainly kind of feels steeped in history. It's a beautiful, beautiful space.
And now we've come to Miss Peregrine. Bring her and all the other inbreeds to the end of the pier in 5 minutes, or face the consequences.
Well, there are a number of sequences which appear to be very challenging from the get-go, particularly the interior of the circus. That's a listed building, so it's not like a film set where we can put holes anywhere we want to. We actually had to build a very intricate wire structure above the ceiling, which then came through on wire bonds and was replicated beneath, so that we can actually work independent of the structure. That was a huge sequence. You know, if you read it in the script, it's one of those sequences, it reads so long and there's so much information in there, it's sometimes hard to picture it off the page. So that was the one previs that we spent the most time and energy on, to film the individual elements of what each of the kids do and where they could be. We set Samuel L. Jackson on fire during that sequence. We had Miss Edwards, who's an actress called Helen Day, who's also an aerialist. So she did all of her own stuff, and we did all of her bungee trapeze act, you know, flying around the circus.
Okay, here we go. And 3, 2, 1, action!
And I'm trying to genuinely scare them, but they all seem very hardy. They're all telling me they're not scared.
We have her jumping down and bouncing up, which was one rig. Then we had another rig that jerked her from the floor and landed her on the tower. Then another one where she jumped down from the tower, bounced on the stairs and up onto grabbing Raffi. Then we have her falling when she's been turned to stone. And there's just so much stuff going on.
You know, I just felt like every day was kind of like, Sam, can we yank you across the room with a wire? Sam, we're gonna light you on fire today. We're gonna put these white contacts in, we're gonna blow a wind machine full blast on you, you know? It's like, and also act, and it was just fun.
To secure the location, what we had to do is we had to take the circus out of commission for the best part of 5 weeks. We had a couple of weeks prep there, a couple of weeks shooting, a week of strike. As well as the circus being involved and the tower, we also shot not just in the circus, we also shot at the North Pier. There's 3 piers in Blackpool, North, Central and South. They're British coastal town piers, you know, they have fairgrounds, they have candy floss, they have the normal sort of things you'd have on piers. They're cheap and cheerful. They were very happy to have us there to promote the town, you know. And in fact, we snowed the whole of the main promenade off.
We actually dressed Blackpool Tower and the road in front of Blackpool for the snow scene, which was great fun, dressing the road to the level that Tim was happy with. We used a lot of snow, covered a large area, and then had to replicate that when we came back to the studios and go onto our pier set, which has been built.
To the audience, they will think that we hopefully shot everything in Blackpool, because we're not trying to say that it's somewhere else. It is meant to be Blackpool. The big section is the pier, and we basically have a fun fair on the pier with a big wheel and dodgems and a ghost train and a carousel. Tim will basically have his own fairground when it's finished to go to, which is very nice. I'm sure he's never had his own fairground before.
And action!
You can't necessarily do everything that you want to do on a practical location. You need to build sets, and in some cases you might even be doing both. You might have the practical location so that you can be inside and bring your characters outside.
When you do decide to build something back in the studio, you have got a bit more freedom to design your own version of what's real. So you then take that on board and you can be a little bit more expansive with the design, but still staying within the brief of it's Blackpool and it's the pier.
Skeleton, so that's like a Tim Burton signature piece, really. He loves a skeleton. There was some design involved in the skeletons. It's like, it's not just a skeleton. He's got this kind of love of Jason and the Argonauts and the Ray Harryhausen skeletons, and that's basically our reference. And so I thought, well, if I go along those lines, I can't really go far wrong. It's a classic scene. So we designed the skeletons on that basis to look a little Ray Harryhausen-esque. The skeletons were designed, by designers on computers, basically. But then we made a physical version of the skeleton so that we can hold up the skull and the bones on the set and we can see exactly what they're supposed to look like in the right lighting.
Go now! Once we got into the action, there was a fight between the children and the hollows. We actually had some real snow made that the children made into snowballs and had great fun throwing all around the set. I think the adults had quite a lot of fun as well, to be honest.
It's a very strange thing, having a book adapted into a movie. It's like so cinematic and so much fun. It's still Miss Peregrine, it's still my world, but it's like Tim was like, what if we went over here? And it works really well for a movie.
The setting in Blackpool kind of serves as a bit of a departure from the book. For the film audience, just deliver a little more of an action sequence and setting in Blackpool. And that's a kind of an arena where events can unfold and reach a climax to the story. It seemed like a perfect kind of environment for that to take place.
You have no idea how long it took me to get here.
Once upon a time, there was a little boy called Abe.
That was you.
That was me. And he lived in a lovely children's home on a little island near Wales, where the sun shone every day. The headmistress, Miss Peregrine, was very clever.
When I was a kid, my grandmother would drag me to these flea markets and swap meets, and I started to find old pictures, black and white pictures. I found a picture of a little girl, very old, and there was something that haunted me deeply about the idea that this little girl, that she had been dead, and convinced me that old pictures had this life beyond themselves that was really fascinating. So that was kind of a bug in my head that stayed with me for a long time. Years later, I was living in Los Angeles, and I found at a swap meet in Pasadena a guy who was selling old photos. I bought a whole bunch of them and I got really obsessed with them. I had an idea for a story, and then they were part of the genesis of the idea for Miss Peregrine.
Roll, please. And action.
Or sit up or something.
When I heard that Tim Burton was going to make the film, I was like, what? This is insane. It was so exciting to me that he was interested in the book and was taking this on as a project.
It was really, really great.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see your vision come to life.
Well, it's a great book. Really.
So much.
You got a great cast and everything.
Really? Yeah.
Really connected.
I just like Ranson's book. I like the fact that he made a story out of finding these old photographs and things, which I love. I collect photographs and things, and I love the fact that you can see an image and it tells you a story without telling you everything. So that he concocted a story based on those kind of strange, unknown photographs, I just found very compelling, very strong, very dreamlike, very powerful, and again, mysterious was just something that I think the book had.
What isn't in this book that's like a Tim Burton movie? The elements, the tone, the world, the interesting and off-center characters.
It lends itself to cinematic material the second you look at it. You just, it's so visually arresting.
I sort of married together my obsession with vintage photos and images and stories and words and mashed them all up.
We're what's known in common parlance as peculiar.
So our characters, they're peculiars. I think it really ties in with Tim's sensibilities. If you look at some of the characters that he's created in his career, even with some of his illustrated books, they're kind of like, not flawed superheroes, but they're abilities that if people didn't really know how to use them, they would kind of be anchored down by them in a way. So I think in a way it goes with his sensibilities, where these are a bit off-center. These aren't your normal children. They just are afflicted with these peculiarities.
Claire, why aren't you eating? She's embarrassed in front of Jake.
Don't be, please.
It's like those feelings of people who are branded peculiar or different. You know, I was just branded strange because I like monster movies, so what's so strange about that? You go through that in your childhood, you go through that in your life, and so I think there's a lot of people that feel peculiar out there. And I think that's, again, something that struck with me. It's a very basic feeling different when you feel that way. That's what the book is. I mean, that's what Ransom sort of built everything upon that. So whether you see the photographs or not see them, it's an important part of the vibe of it.
I think from the moment I read the book, I could picture it as a movie, and most particularly as a movie directed by Tim. The visuals are a massively strong part of the book, and so, you know, it's not a huge leap to see it in a cinematic sense.
When I heard she was writing the adaptation, I was super excited. And then, you know, a year later, I got a script. And, you know, I saw these things that Jane had written and Tim had done, and I thought, like, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd thought of that. That's so smart.
The book hadn't been out that much, so I wasn't even aware of what people liked about it. Usually when your book has been around, you know, you gotta have that sequence, you gotta have this or that. This didn't feel that way to me. This felt more of an emotional sort of feeling than it is like this and that happening. So we just try to be true to the spirit of it.
I think some of the challenges were actually about extending the end of the story, which is actually unusual for an adaptation. Quite often you're, you know, having to cut things out, but actually, you know, the story was so sort of beautifully and succinctly told that it almost, it felt that it could continue.
Go to her, Jake. You have the map. You can get back to 1943.
Honestly, I think it's more interesting than seeing page for page exactly what happens in the book. For cinematic reasons that pay off really well, their powers have been switched around and changed a little bit. So now Emma, rather than summoning fire from her fingertips, controls air and is lighter than air.
The changes from the book to Emma came out of conversations that Tim and I both had, and I think we both felt the same way, that it was almost the dynamic in the relationship and the fire ability just felt a little similar to maybe things that we'd seen before.
And action!
The floating was such a beautiful visual, that the peculiarity of being lighter than air, it felt there was so much you could do, you know, in terms of Jake's interactions with Emma and his relationship with her.
I nearly messed that up.
Abe did too, the first time.
It's a great peculiarity, but there's so much stuff you can do.
It allows her to raise the ship and have this amazing scene, and all of this cool stuff that happens was enabled by her having that ability.
Of course, there's the element of fantasy that you always have in a Tim Burton film. So that gives you license to stray away from the historical facts and the historical looks and be a bit more creative with the whole visual thing of the film. Tim is very much a director who will let you have your own creative input. So, for example, if a script asks for a particular thing for a character, I will tend to do about 10 versions of what I think it should be, and then I will show those ideas to Tim and to Collie in costume, and together we'll choose which one we think will work best.
The process of film design and filmmaking is a collaborative process. You're creating a character to help move a story forward. And so in the beginning, you talk to the director about his vision of what the script is and what the character is. So you kind of have a better direction of where to go with it. And then I meet with the actor and talk about how they see the character, show them my ideas, and then start making from that point.
She shows up, and her design concept is pretty much perfect, spot on.
They're monsters, Jake. They'll slaughter anything in their path.
To be in this costume, it kind of makes it easy as an actor. It helps you to get under the skin of the character.
For sure, it's a collaboration. There's a lot of inspiration in what Colleen produces that helps me a lot, and I really value her opinion in what I do with the hair and makeup as well.
I just think the feeling of the book and the mood of the book and the sort of images in the book evoke a certain sort of style, and each character is sort of almost an exaggeration. So each one is kind of the sort of iconic version of that in a way that sort of made it a fun challenge.
I really enjoyed the creative process. And again, I try to work with people that I really love.
It's always amazing working with Tim. He looks at the big picture.
The shots and the colors and the angles, I mean, it's very inspiring to write some music for that stuff.
I think simple is a repeating thing that Tim talked about. He wanted it to feel something that you could really latch onto. He always talked about the music not wanting to feel too busy, also not too big, and he kept using the word poetic. If we'd recorded an orchestral cue, it's like, let's dial that back and let's look at what else is in there, you know, favouring some synth stuff and some real, you know, certainly non-organic stuff. He was not scared to try that, which was great for us.
We thought, what did Ransom Riggs have in mind when he wrote the story? And Tim really wanted this film to be peculiar. It is a good word. It describes a lot of what's happening on this movie.
It's weird to think that we're in some way collaborators, even though I did my collaboration years ago and now he's doing his part. It's still sort of the marriage of these two, you know, pieces of the puzzle. And I wanted to visit the set because who wouldn't? I love movies and movie making, and to see not only the film being made from my book, but Tim Burton making the film of my book and on this grand scale was something I just had to see. We're in Belgium, in a little town called Brechat, on the outskirts of Antwerp. And this is the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children movie set. It says verboten, but we can go in here. It's not verboten to us. It's like something out of a storybook, and I don't mean that as a pun or anything. It's like classic fairy tale type house. There's a bird, which is thematically appropriate. It's fantastic. This is the exciting part, which is when you get to watch Tim Burton direct the movie. Where I still am like pinching myself because I can't believe it's happening. Yeah. I'm gonna take this home with me. I think the rule is that the author gets one prop from the set as a memento, and I choose this. This is one of the carrots in the wild. Now these are real, I believe, real tomatoes, which, no, they're not real tomatoes. I even got faked out. This is the best movie. And that's it. They're very healthy kids. They just eat these vegetables, and that's how they live to be so old. So eat your vegetables, kids, and you can live to be 100 years old and still look like you're a teenager too. It's been like the treat of my life to be here and to walk into these sets of Miss Peregrine's house and the kids, and to walk onto Cairnholm Island and the village, which were so similar to what I had imagined. That I thought, like, you know, maybe Tim had spied on my dreams or something.
How did you...
Air. It's my peculiarity.
It really fits, and you can see it in the art direction, the cinematography, the sets, everything really comes together as a Tim Burton film.
For fans of Ransom and Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, it's a full rendering. It's Tim Burton. It's the collaboration of Tim Burton and Ransom bringing this story to life. And it's a full world. It's a zany world. It's a wild world.
It's creepy and sweet. It's scary and funny. Ultimately, there's a heart of gold inside the slightly unusual, uncanny exterior. Everyone has totally invested themselves into these million details that make up the tapestry of the movie, and it's so cool to see how all of their work gels together to create Miss Peregrine.
Don't just stand there. Come in. Your tea's getting cold.